I am Jonathan Baro. I am the Executive Director of Agrochemical Philippines, a network of small-scale farmers in the 25 provinces of the Philippines. The mission of our organization is to help build resilient farming communities, training conventional for chemical farmers on organic farming and agroecology in general. Farmers here in the Philippines are still applying glyphosate or Roundup Ready herbicide. It causes erosions. It causes the loss of soil biodiversity and the unproductivity of farmlands.
Our government urged us to buy as commercial fertilizer. The cost of production became bigger every planting season.
Just like in any other developing countries, farmers are strangled by heavy debts from the agrochemical corporations, from Monsanto, from Syngenta, from Bayer, who are doing business with the seeds. And we are training the farmers to developing, collecting, and sharing seeds with other farmers. It's very important because with these locally developed seeds, farmers are more resilient to drought, to floods, and pest infestation, for instance. Farmers are very instrumental in addressing climate change. They are the one who can really feel the impacts of climate change. And with their farming practices, they can contribute so much to sequester carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to the soil.
We are practicing regenerative agriculture to return the microorganisms that feeds back to the plants. Using the system of rice intensification, we only use a minimal amount of water, sequestering carbon and methane back to the soil.
With this COVID-19 crisis, which affects the local movements of food in the whole Philippines, although in general it's not good, it invites the consumers at the local level to buy directly from the farmers.
We're selling our produce 60% lower than our produce being sold in the market because everything is found in our farm. The seed, the fertilizer. So we don't have to sell our product at high price.
Those farmers who are practicing chemical, conventional agriculture, they are now buying from the organic farmers. They are relying from the produce of the organic farmers. Why? They are practicing diversified, integrated organic farming model. They are able to provide their everyday needs. This has the support of the local government officials are now seeing the full potentials of what organic agriculture can do, especially at the household and at the community level.
I am from Chennai, where I was caught in a flood. Due to the heavy rain, a lot of rain which we received, till first floor the water was like all the houses were inside the water. After 1 month we don't know where it went. The aquifer didn't get filled, so it went into the sea, wasted again. People need to be really aware of what's going on in the nature. The underground, it's like a tank. Imagine it as a tank, and you see, you keep on filling it, but you have a hole on the bottom in which the water is leaking. What's the point in filling it when it's wasted? because deforestation is happening. So we need to plant more trees, so we have to come back to reforestation instead. All this project is about conserving water and filling the aquifer with water. Dig it, put the mud on the other side, and then plant trees. The more we plant trees, the more rain we get, and it's a big cycle. Okay, so the place which I'm standing, it's a bund. So a pit was dug in this side and all the muds were put here, and people were allowed to walk here so that it becomes strong without any mushing. All the water is gathered here and then it goes underneath and it increases the water table level. So all the plants here, the trees, they help in keeping the water there. So after the bunds, it's the swell, which is again an important part of saving water. So here it's like we dig a straight line of swale, we plant small saplings on it. So once the water is filled there, the soil in the other side, it's not hard, so it's very smooth. So the water can go into it and it nourishes the soil in the other side. So when the water flows from the other side, it stays here and then overflows and then goes. So it again slows down the soil erosion. At the same time, it helps in getting the water into the ground. And so the thing is, the water will be flowing and then it will come to this basin, which is like this dam, and this dam gets full and it overflows to the other dam, which is over the other side. So it gets into the forest. And so here again it acts like a pond, like a pool. So the water goes down and again it flows and then aquifer is nourished with the water. How people in other places plant, but I feel this is something special because we don't dig a hole and plant the plants. We make a mulch on top of the ground in which the plant is placed.
There's nothing like too much mulch. Mulching is very important because this is a very arid and area and the sun is very, very strong here. So if we mulch the tree, we protect it from the sun and we also enable the tree to benefit from the leaves breaking down and having more nutrients. The sun can dry here down to 46 centimeters below ground. So mulching is super critical to the survival and the growth of the trees.
So how often do we mulch?
We mulch whenever we can see soil. So if we see any soil around the tree, we immediately mulch it. If we can see the soil, then the sun can see the soil as well. And that means that the tree will be dried.
Yeah.
So we should always mulch as much as possible.
Yeah.
Mulch much.
Daru bida twin aso tong tu tong ya a twi ri a tani thet tani pu pu bi do tet la la ရှင်အဲဆိုတော့နောက်ပိုင်းမှာကျရင်အခုတောင်သူတွေကစိုက်ပျိုးရေးမလုပ်ချင်တော့ပဲအခြားလုပ်ငန်းကိုပြောင်းသွားချင်တာတွေရှိတယ်
အရင်တော့လောက်နေအခုလောက်နေတော့ကွာချအရင်တော့တော့ချီတဲ့တိတ်မထဲရဘူးမြေဩဇာလည်းတိတ်မသုံးရဘူးအခုကတော့ချီတဲ့မြမရမြေဩဇာလည်းမြမရတယ်လက်စားအငှားရလဲငှားခါစေးကြီးရအများကွာချတယ်အရင်တော့လောက်နေ
ကျမတို့တဘဝခါတိုင်းကအဖေတို့တုန်းကဆက်ခဲ့တာတဘဝနဲ့ဆက်ခဲ့ရတာတော့အောင်မြင်ပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့အခုနောက်ပိုင်းကတော့ဓာတုပစ္စည်းနဲ့စိတ်တာအောင်မြင်ပါတယ်ဒါပေမဲ့အကျိုးတွေကတအားထူထားတော့အဆင်မပြေပါဘူး
How can we solve this problem without using poisons? How can we use nature? Plants we can use as bio-insecticides, already growing here wild. This grass has its defences against the caterpillars. It has sharp silica hairs. Those hairs are like glass, and they cut. Be very careful because you'll feel lots of little bits of sharp hair. Those sharp silica hairs, they cut up the caterpillar and that breaks the breeding cycle. This plant here, the Desmodium, it suppresses weeds. It is a legume, so it gives all the nitrogen that you need for growing corn. You don't have to buy any nitrogen fertilizer. By covering the soil, it protects it from erosion when we get heavy rain. And Desmodium puts out these strong smells. It repels the pests, so we don't need to use poison to spray on it. And when it's flowering, it actually attracts the beneficial insects as well, brings them in. And it's very good stock feed. Farmers in Africa now will periodically cut this and feed it to their cows. And this is your native Desmodium that I've just picked. You have it growing wild here.
不打谁啊了，没懂定了，没懂定了，没懂定了。大家你对吧？你懂什么讲啊？哎，我讲你懂了不讲啊？谁啊这样？
Hello, I'm Oliver Gardner for Regeneration International in Abidjan, Côte d'Ivoire, for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. 195 countries work all together to fight droughts and regenerate land. Regeneration International is taking part in this COP, this Conference of Parties. We're here speaking to Precious Piri, the Regeneration International Director for Africa. Hi Precious.
Hi Oliver, thanks for having me.
Combating desertification in Africa is something that you know extensively about.
Over the years we've seen ecosystems really rapidly lose the value and deserts advancing because of how we manage our land, our livestock, our resources, and also maybe how we relate with our resources as we face hardships. There tends to be a lot of enmity between the human and nature. we realized that solutions really lie within us, deep within us, because we were never woven separately with the lands that we live in and that we manage.
You've been working with communities and communities of pastoralists, and you've been working with livestock to heal degraded land, to heal land that is actually desertifying. Here are some pictures of what the land you have attended looked like, and this is what it looks like today. How did you get to this result, Precious?
Working in land regeneration or regeneration of any sort takes long, right? Because it involves a lot of dynamics in one place. So, for example, we are looking at the Samburu land in Kenya, where I went to actually help some colleagues from the Gravis Zebra Trust, who had invited me to come and create dialogues and visions and plans for their communities. They started implementing in 2019, and you can see the differences. And this land they continue to monitor, where they've put these marks on these pictures. So I'm so glad that they continue to send me updates.
That's really impressive, Precious. And so what other projects have you worked on?
So another project is from a community called Ndlovu, where the leadership is very strong. So I'm talking by leadership, I'm talking traditional community-based leadership. We don't jump into processes of planning before we actually go through the dialogues of what it will take for us to achieve these visions that we've created. So we start off with creating visions of values which we call holistic context, and people buy into that because this is what they would rather live by or rather die. So Ndlovu community started in 2020, and this is the picture. We started off with dialogues, and then they implemented using their animals under strong leadership.
So here we have a picture of so here the land is degraded, it's dry, the organic matter there is very brittle. What caused this land degradation in the first place, and what are you bringing in? How are you using this livestock to have this result in improving soil health, improving biodiversity, and creating resilient communities to desertification and climate change?
What caused it is such an important question, Oliver. What causes land degradation and most of our world's problems is none other than management. So the way we move animals on the land is better when it mimics the natural patterns of the large herbivores that have evolved with the African savanna rangelands. And this expands to beyond just growing grasses and healing our beautiful mountains. But it also can be used, the same concept, you bring it to cropping. They use the same biological process of the animal to improve their harvest. Like this community that I'm showing you right now, this farmer is having 2 times more harvest than others. And in other years, because this is sandy, rough and harsh soil, but you can compare the 2 soil types, you can see that the other one shows that there is no food in this soil. The other one, there is food. And for this, you don't need science, you don't need to explain anything, because the results will show you.
What is holistic management, and what is regeneration, regenerative development, and how should it and how could it be applied by the parties here at the UNCCD COP?
So holistic management is a simple decision-making framework that really helps us manage complexity and the dynamics that are involved in managing our environmental patterns. And regeneration is again a framework that brings in just relations, thriving ecosystems, bringing out the potential of each place if it were lost, or bringing out the reverence also of the people and the cohesion. Almost like the same as holistic management, social, economic, and ecological thriving. That's what regeneration should focus on, or is. And then when we look at the relevance in this conference that we are in, which is the COP15 of the UNCCD, my biggest dream, or wildest dream as it were, would be to have all these protocols that are created really being done holistically, or acknowledging the dynamics of the uniqueness of each place, And the first thing that would probably come into place is there is no best practice. There is all practices that are relevant to each place. And if our policies could accommodate the uniqueness of each environment and the insightfulness of the people that live there and build the stories from the ground, coming back up, at the same time putting in funding in funnels that will really promote lots of funding on the ground with people's boots on the ground, I think these conferences would have a different vibe. If we were to use the word vibe, is it allowed on your interview?
Our interview?
In our interview, yes. So I think regeneration really helps us move from me, my solutions, this is what I've done, to a collective we, understanding that we're contributing to a bigger thing than our name, which is what really is a big symbolism of Regeneration International. We understand that this work is bigger than each one organization, and that's what regeneration is.
Okay, thank you very much, Precious, for this interview. We'll be coming back to you very soon with some more interviews and also with some feedback of this side event that we're organizing on agave mesquite agroforestry in Mexico. Bye.
Bye. Okay, so hi everyone. I am here with Walter Mugowenyika, who is the General Coordinator of an organization called RESCOP, which stands for Regional Schools and College Permaculture Network. Walter has been on this for almost all his life, and he's an incredible example of people who have really led in the regeneration and agroecology movement. He's a natural farmer, sustainability practitioner, and community development facilitator. I've had an incredible opportunity to work on a small agroecology and regeneration for communities book with Walter and some of our colleagues. So it's really amazing to have him here today, because most of his work is also focused on building resilience and food sovereignty in the African communities that are across the whole African region. And over the last 3 decades, he has contributed as a key player in the SCOP and RESCOP networks to developing land use design process as a tool for inclusive and participatory practice for schools in land designing, that is. And also he uses this for community engagement. He's also an eco-village development facilitator and a member of the Global Eco-Village Network, which we famously know as GEN. He's in the African Advisory Council. So today he's going to share on the work that he's doing to help communities move towards food sovereignty. And this includes working on healthy living soils, farmer seed systems, rainwater harvesting, and their importance in building regenerative food systems. Walter is also very keen on landscape development as part of the agroecology movement. Walter, over to you. Thank you so much for taking your time to come and be with us today.
Thank you very much, Precious, for the generous introduction. Hello everyone, and it is my pleasure to contribute towards our celebration of the World Food Day by sharing our experiences as the Regional Schools and Colleges Permaculture Program, RESCOP in short. And I am sharing to you from our base in Lusaka, Zambia. So I will introduce you to our school's permaculture program, and also take time to look at the issue of food, particularly the questions of what food and whose food we are talking about, and also look at what we believe to be good food, and then we will look at how we are working with communities towards seed and food sovereignty, and this includes also our work on promoting agroecological regenerative practices such as rainwater harvesting and improving soils. And then we will end by concluding on how this work is contributing towards building hope, resilience, and abundance. So RISCOP is a multi-sectoral partnership which supports intergenerational learning towards more resilient school communities. So we work with a number of different organizations, including educational institutions, local civil society organizations that are promoting agroecology, and also government agencies, especially in the areas of agriculture and education. Unlike other organizations that work with the schools, we promote what we call a whole school approach, which means working with a number of stakeholders in an inclusive way, and also working with the whole school in terms of the land area, the environment that is included in the school perimeter. And we have also developed a step-by-step tool that we use to help school communities to regenerate their landscapes. And we call this integrated land use design, ILUD in short. And we are a regional program that is working with school communities in at least 5 countries: Kenya, Malawi, Uganda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. And we use the schools as entry points into communities, and this is very precious or very valuable for us because schools are an undervalued resource in community development. The schools can contribute a lot towards development of the communities in which they are located, and they are natural centers for their communities. You find that farmers and other community members visit their local school for many reasons from time to time, and schools are also a melting pot where the future meets the present. So if we are to help shape the future, we need to work within our schools. Children are also much more effective learners than adults, so it takes very little investment to bring change in the minds of the children as compared to working with adults. And the future leaders, future farmers are in school today, and as well, learners are a daily link between the school and the community. Farmers are a critical stakeholder in the food chain, and every farmer is in a school catchment area. So the tool that we have developed for helping school communities to transform minds and landscapes is called Integrated Land Use Design. So it is a tool that school communities can use to plan and implement their agroecological regenerative work. And it involves working with all the stakeholders in and around the school, and the tool, as we developed it, was informed by a number of approaches such as holistic management, permaculture, and participatory methodologies. It involves a number of steps. The first one being grounding. Grounding means reconnecting the school community with their culture, with the nature, and with their history. So this is a very critical step because many people in African communities have been disconnected from their own history because their story is being told by other people. And also we have children who have been disconnected from the environment around them due to the industrial Western model of development that has influenced their lives. And some are even disconnected from their own culture as they have been made to believe that being a Black African is associated with inferiority status. And so when we ask the communities the right questions, they get reconnected with who they truly are. And this lays a very important foundation for all the work that follows. After this reconnection, we help the school communities to look at the existing resources that they have, analyzing their existing situation so that they can appreciate their resource endowment that they have as they start this regenerative work. So we ask them about the resources that they have, and at first the communities look surprised because for the last 100 or so years, people have been coming into their communities to ask the question, what do you need? And this question puts a poverty label on the communities. So they end up believing that they are the poorest of the poor and they have nothing. But through good facilitation, we make them realize that they are actually very rich in the resources that they have. Once they acknowledge the resources that they have, we help them to look at the future so that they can dream a better future and describe their dreams for a future they want. And once they have that clear vision, we help them to come up with a design, a redesign of their land so that they can start working towards their new vision. And finally, they develop a plan of action for implementing and monitoring their new design. So that's the work that we do. Now I want to spend a short while looking at the issue of food, because for me there are two food systems. There is the conventional food system, which is corporate driven, which treats food as just a commodity, and where access to food is at the mercy of markets and profit. And also the food system is highly globalized and highly controlled by only a few people. And the food system, which is global, has a very large carbon footprint, thereby contributing to climate change. And this food system promotes global inequities. So you find those who have more get more, and those who have little become even poorer. On the other hand, a good food system should be farmer-driven, where food is produced and accessed locally. And also the food chain is very short, so that consumers can actually know and understand the farmers who produce the food that they eat, so that consumers can have the choice to demand for wholesome and organic food, which is more healthy. And also communities, especially the farming communities, can enjoy food sovereignty, and both consumers and farmers can prolong their traditions, the food traditions, which are necessary for healthy communities. And when we look at what is good food? Good food is local, traditional, wholesome, and organic. When you have these four characteristics, you can hardly go wrong in terms of the food that we need to celebrate. And good food goes beyond food security to food sovereignty, where the producers of food are in total control of the food production process. So this really helps us to get and to sustain good food. Good food also helps us to achieve nutrition security. So it's not a question of just having full tummies, but also contributing towards healthy communities. And good food also helps communities to enjoy income security. And we are talking of farming communities, not just the few who control the food system. Good food also helps us to promote farmers' rights, especially the farmers' right to their own seed, and also the farmers' ability to have resilience against climate change. So towards promoting this good food, we, together with our Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, we are currently running a My Food is African campaign, because recently there was a shock in the global system when the war in Ukraine started, and it is really uncomfortable for some of us in Africa that we can be affected in terms of food access by what is happening in Ukraine. And this is because our food system has been hijacked. Otherwise, Africa is able to be self-sufficient in food, and we should not have our food security being affected by what is happening in such faraway countries as Ukraine. So that's the background to this campaign, My Food is African campaign. And as we promote good food, we also realize that water is an essential resource in producing food, in making communities become food sovereign. And again, we have a tale of two water stories. On the one hand, we have a bad water management story, which is exemplified by water being a commodity sold in bottles for people to access clean water. And you have in this water management system, landscapes are bare and sometimes covered with concrete and usually covered with monocultures. And as a result, most of the water runs off the surface, runs off the land, and this approach to water management is characterized by ecological illiteracy, where people hardly understand the water cycle and do very little to enhance the water cycle. And we also have high levels of water pollution. That's why people can only access clean water by buying it. Then bores, wells, dams are seen as major sources of water. On the other hand, we are promoting a healthy water management system, which is characterized by abundant clean water, unlimited access to clean water, and we have landscapes with a lot of trees and biodiversity, and a lot of water as a result sinks into the soil, and farmers support the water cycle and limit wastage, and also we see the rain as the primary source of water, and we access this important resource through springs. And in this promotion of the water cycle, there are a set of principles that we use, and this we call them the S principles. And the first of these is to start harvesting rainwater from the highest point on the landscape, and to slow down the rain as it comes to the ground, so that it softly lands on the land, and that allows it to enter the soil. The other principle is to stop the flow of water away from a particular farm, and also helping water to spread on the land so that it can have time to sink into the ground, and to also store the water in various ways. For example, in small earth dams, tanks, containers, and also to invest in rainwater harvesting infrastructure, such as contour ridges, pit beds, and reviving springs is at the heart of this work. So when we practice these principles, when we put them into practice, we find that the landscape will be rich in terms of water, and we find that trees are water. So where you want water, do plant trees. And we also emphasize maintenance of ground cover and regeneration of rangelands and other commons in the communities, and also to help communities share on good water management, good rainwater harvesting practices. So we are participating in the Water School Africa initiative, which is connecting communities that are practicing rainwater harvesting. Just to show you a few images, so this is one community in Monze district in Zambia, where they are making rainwater harvesting structures such as the Swell on the left and the check dam on the right, so that they can stop the water from leaving their community and keep it in the ground and on the surface. And also using designs like the mandala beds in the gardens, so you can see before and after situation there in terms of gardening designs. And these structures are also meant to make sure that water sinks into the ground. The pits that we have talked about can also be planted with water-loving plants such as pawpaw, papaya, and bananas, so that water can sink into the ground. And with these practices, communities end up enjoying water security. Then we also help communities, school communities, to improve their soils. And here we emphasize a number of principles such as feeding the soil and not the plant, and also promoting soil biology rather than just soil chemistry. So we see soil as a living organism which needs shelter, moisture, food, just like other living organisms. And then we have the principle of returning to the soil whatever comes out of the soil. And we also train the school communities in making organic fertilizer supplements, such as bokashi, where they use local materials to make a very rich living fertilizer, which has a high level of microorganisms that continue to keep the soil healthy. So as a result of these interventions, our communities are able to regenerate their soils. They are able to produce food forests, which create abundance for not only people, but for the whole ecosystem. And we have predator-prey systems that are also regenerated for resilience against the pest and disease outbreaks. And also communities anchor their food production on the local traditional seeds that they serve and multiply and share so that they can enjoy seed sovereignty, which is the foundation of their farming system. And they produce a diverse range of organic foods that contribute towards better health. And we are also grooming a young generation of responsible farmers, which offer us hope for the future. So you can see as a result that on the left is a school in Zimbabwe, and you can see the abundance that is right in the middle of the school grounds. So these children have access to healthy, nutritious food all year round. And on the right is a school in Uganda, which is also showing enjoying a similar abundance and giving hope to the surrounding community, and showing how farming can be resilient if designed in harmony with nature. Thank you very much, and have a happy World Food Day. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Walter. I really appreciated your angle and all your experiences that you've shared so generously here. This could easily be turned into a teaching podcast, because that's such invaluable information that you shared. Also, the most important question that probably really struck me in your talk is, whose food? You know, what food as well? So definitely, because in different cultures and where we come from, we call different things food. And so, yes, this validates the campaign that you spoke about from AFSA. It says, my food is African. And definitely, like one of the African presidents asked recently, why would a war between Ukraine and Russia cause people in Africa to starve? So we are really going into that trajectory of us owning the story of our food. So Walter, before you go, what last words do you have to say for especially, I think, consumers on the African continent, those that are consuming the food that comes from either us, the smallholder agroecological farmers, or the general food market? What words would you have for them?
Thank you very much for that very critical question. I think it's very important that consumers ask themselves who defines what is food for them. They should really ask this question, who defines what is food for them? And that question, if explored, can help consumers to move in the direction of healthy food, and also in the direction of shaping the future of farming in their communities. So they should end up, therefore, demanding healthy food so that farmers can be forced to produce healthy food which the consumers are demanding. So I think that that's the question that consumers should explore. Who defines what is food and what is really good food? If they follow that, I think it will take us a long way towards food sovereignty in our communities.
Thank you, Walter.
Siempre que nosotros tengamos una planta de maguey, pues vamos a ver un ingreso, ¿verdad?
Y que no requiere fertilizantes o riego,
sino que la plantas y ahí mismo pues ella se adapta.
Las borregas también para los ganados sí sirven bastante.
El riñón de agaves genera economía para campesinos y campesinas.
Approximately 40% of the world's land is composed of deserts and drylands. Over 2 billion people are dependent on these areas. The whole idea of the Billion Agave project is to actually start looking at how we can regenerate these types of arid ecosystems.
We bring the tool of livestock and the creativity of the human mind to then recreate the rangelands that we had, so that these animals can have lots of food in the non-growing season. You can also introduce agave agroforestry.
Una estrategia que pretende volver los ojos al maguey nuevamente y verlo como una planta realmente aliada ante la crisis climática.
Es una planta que captura CO2 del ambiente, que además es refugio de flora y fauna silvestre y que retiene los suelos.
Una planta que asociada con especies de leguminosas se vuelve una planta que resiste los climas semiáridos, que se adapta, que se vuelve productiva.
Aquí tenemos lo que son asociados el maguey con varias plantas. Tenemos las moras que se alcanzan a ver por ahí al final. Tenemos olivos y pues también tenemos asociados lo que son los animales, las gallinas, de repente también algunos conejos que andan por ahí. Entonces no necesita de mayor espacio tampoco y podemos asociarlo con diferentes plantas.
Nos da diferentes beneficios como alimento, como material para construcción, como forraje para los animales.
Por beneficio de la gente, mucha gente aquí, los de las comunidades, tienen sus huertos de maguey.
¿Verdad? Porque no vamos a gastar en comprar forraje para nuestros animales porque nosotros ya lo tenemos. Pues es una invitación a que todos pongamos nuestro...
Aquí Biorgánica tiene su máquina preparada para moler forraje. Se muele, se envasa en botes de 20 litros, que son 20 kilos. Se deja 28 días. A los 28 días se les da el forraje que es a chivas, borregas, reses y gallinas, cerdos.
This system can be modified for any arid or semi-arid ecosystem on all our continents. Because All our continents, we have native drought-resistant trees. You know, for instance, here in Africa, Fiderbia is a classic one. Then all the acacias, then we can talk about Sesbanias and Albetzias. You know, Africa is just rich in these species. We've got hundreds we can play with. Plus, various agave species are already naturalized here. They're naturalized on every continent, you know. They're already here.
This is taken in Ethiopia, in Amara region. The two women in front are planting trees, but as you can see behind, there's an agave plant, and you can see the amount of biomass you have there. And in this area, areas that are deforested, it's a good 4 months of the year where they really suffer from droughts. The animals do not have any shade, so they'll die in the sun. And that plant there is just sitting there. But all they need is a machine and a few buckets, and they could keep their livestock alive. So you can see this happening in many other places throughout the world.
We can regenerate arid landscapes. We can improve the health and productivity of their livestock. Really important, and provide affordable food for families and improve their livelihoods. That's one of the most important things we're talking about. Hello, Vandana. It's so wonderful to have you here, and I'd like to welcome you and just introduce you to our viewers. Vandana is a legend in many ways. She has won multiple awards and prizes. Two of the notable ones are the Sydney Peace Prize and the Right Livelihood Award that we actually call it the Alternative Nobel Prize, but for most of us, the people who actually get this award actually deserve it, and Vandana definitely deserves it. The other thing about Vandana, she's a prolific author. I've lost count of the amount of books that she's written, and she tends to publish more than one book a year on a whole range of subjects. And one of the most critical books she wrote was called The Violence of the Green Revolution. And she exposed the, let's say mythologies, but really the outright lies of how the Green Revolution was supposed to feed people when it was actually doing the opposite and bringing people into violent poverty and destroying communities. The irony is that, I shouldn't even say irony, the sadness is that in this day and age, the Green Revolution is causing even more problems around the world on multiple continents. And Vandana has been very active raising these issues. So, Vandana, I'll hand it over to you, and if you'd like to explain why it is so important to counter the Green Revolution and industrial agriculture and to promote the regenerative organic systems based on agroecology.
Thank you so much, Andre, and greetings for World Food Day to you and all. Food wasn't going to be a subject that I would dedicate my life to. I had thought I'd dedicate my life to the quanta, and that's quantum theory is where my passion was. I had done my MSc honors in particle physics from the University of Punjab in Chandigarh. In the early 70s, I had graduated. A decade later, the most prosperous part of India, Punjab, had erupted in violence. And that same year, in the city of Bhopal, a pesticide plant leaked. I was those days working on conflicts over resources for the United Nations University. And I said that there's some conflict here that is not obvious. I do know there are water conflicts, but what really is the reason farmers are protesting? Why are 15,000 people killed in Punjab, the land of the 5 rivers? Why do people have to die in Bhopal? And then I studied agriculture. I read every book that's taught in agriculture. I read every policy document of that time. There was no click a mouse and get it on Google. It was all actually physically go to the Agriculture Ministry, to the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. And the myth of the Green Revolution that it saved India from famine is so outright false, because there was no famine in 65. There was a drought. The drought had led to slight increases in the prices of wheat. No one was dying. There was not one single hunger death in 1965. But the narrative is, oh, India was saved from famine. And they take us back into the 42 famine with images. 42 was when the British were extracting grain from India's taxes. And we'd lost 2 million people in the Great Bengal famine. But after we became independent, we got rid of famine. We created policies that don't allow famine. And those policies are precisely what the Green Revolution dismantled. What was the Green Revolution? It wasn't green. It was very bloody. It was very brown in terms of desertifying the land. The land of Punjab has been ruined. The farmers tell me, we have cancer because a cancer train leaves Punjab and the soil has cancer. And these are hardworking farmers of the soil. The Green Revolution was merely pushing chemical fertilizers, which have increased 800% since that time, because the objective was fertilizers. Norman Borlaug has said it in his statements. We have to sell more fertilizers. And if I was a member of Indian Parliament, I'd be jumping out every 5 minutes and saying, fertilizers, give me more fertilizers. So it was, Green Revolution was pushing synthetic chemical fertilizers. We now know what harm they've done. We know they are primarily responsible for the most potent greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide. We know they're killing the oceans and water life through dead zones. We know they're desertifying the soil. But for me, the most painful part is I grew up in a pre-Green Revolution India. And if I'd go to the tribal areas, the women would be having silver all the way in their, in their arms. They would be covered with silver jewelry. And then when the Green Revolution came and was spread beyond Punjab, the silver was as pawned to the fertilizer shop. People sold their wealth to get synthetic fertilizer because of this brainwashing, subsidies, everything else that went with it. So the real wealth of the farmers was robbed for a leftover chemical weapon, because synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, is made by the same process that makes ammunitions and explosives. And that's why there's so many fertilizer bombs. The Haber-Bosch process of fixing atmospheric nitrogen, when we can work with nature, work with biodiversity to fix nitrogen non-violently through nitrogen fixing plants, the green manures, the pulses, and then the soil organisms are creating nitrogen for us. Our research at Navdania has shown that our soils, organic soils, the Navdania farm soils and the farmers who become organic have approximately 100% more nitrogen in them. The farms using urea and synthetic fertilizer have a decline of 22% nitrogen. So the Green Revolution got farmers into debt. Farmers became outraged. That's why the violence of '84 took place. And when I wrote the book, The Violence of the Green Revolution, I was using my quantum philosophy, that the context is what creates the phenomena. It's not a Cartesian cause of particle A hits particle B. No, the context allows the same quanta to become a particle or a wave. The context of the Green Revolution imposed by the United States as a weapon of war. Kissinger said, food is a weapon. They used the doublespeak of peace, food for peace, but really it was about control. And through the Green Revolution, the global agriculture has been controlled by the Rockefellers, now the Gates. Mr. Gates has taken the Green Revolution, which we failed and destroyed India, Punjab. He's taken it to Africa as the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. And all the research is now showing that the nutrition has gone down, farmers' incomes have gone down, only the sales of chemical fertilizers and commercial commodity seeds have gone up. And country by country, the laws are being changed to push GMOs. So today, as we join in the World Food Summit celebration, People's Food Summit, I reach out to our friends in Africa who will be celebrating this day with us to continue the movement to stop Agra. I always say, this Agra, Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa, this Agra will never build a Taj Mahal. It will leave ruins. It will destroy biodiversity. And therefore, around the world, we need to stop the violence of the Green Revolution, which is the violence of industrial agriculture, which is the violence of chemicals designed to kill both human beings as well as life on Earth. The biodiversity of the planet has been destroyed by the Green Revolution. It was 75% already gone in 1995 when we did the meeting on plant genetic resources in Leipzig. Today it's above 90%. Today, 80% of the insects have gone. If you use insecticides and pesticides, that's what you do. But more importantly, if you use a chemical to kill green life on plants, and you've done so much work, Andre, the beautiful book you wrote on growing life, that ultimately it's the photosynthetic biomass that creates life on Earth and gives us food. And here is a weapon, glyphosate, Roundup, to destroy photosynthetic biomass. What could be a bigger crime against humanity and against the Earth?
You mentioned Agra, and I think one of the really telling things about Agra, it started in 2006 with the aim of doubling food production, and the Gates Foundation, with the help from Rockefeller and the US and UK governments, put in over $1 billion into it, mostly to push synthetic fertilizers, synthetic pesticides, and GMOs. And the result at the end was, in the target countries, there was 30% more hunger. And I look at the figures, when we talk about, when we start looking at hunger around the world, today's World Food Day, and when we look at food insecurity, it was slowly dropping until the 1990s, and then in the 1990s it starts to take off. We have more hungry people now than ever before in the history of this planet. And it's in the 1990s where we saw the introduction of the Roundup Ready GMOs, but really the push for modern industrial agriculture. So I'd just like for you to just sort of speak more on it, how this whole push for essentially growing commodities instead of growing food is increasing the number of people who go without adequate nutrition.
Now having spent more than 4 decades on reflecting what food is and saving the seeds of life that give us food. Navdania means, as you know, 9 seeds. It stands for diversity. And today, while we join virtually for the People's Food Summit on the Navdania farm, we will be honoring our leading seed keepers who have saved the crops that were being forgotten and pushed to extinction, the millets, the jangora, the mandava, the corny, and the beautiful basmati of Dehradun, which had nearly become extinct. And now we have more than 2,000 farmers growing it. And it is the rice we saved from patenting and the biopiracy of the basmati, a famous case where a company in Texas called Rice Tech had taken a patent on basmati, on the grain, on the seed, on its renewal, on the height of the plant, and on methods of cooking rice that I learned when I was 6 years old. My grandmother taught me. Simple meal, just boil rice. Why are more people hungry today? As a result of industrial agriculture and globalization. Then when they were doing ecological farming, biodiverse farming, small farms. First, we do know even today, in spite of all the efforts to promote industrial agriculture, 70 to 80% of the food we eat comes from small farms. The giant-sized farms produce commodities. They do not produce food. Commodities do not feed people. 80% of the corn and soya being grown in the world, and these are the two crops that have spread during the globalization period, they are going for animal feed and biofuel. They're not feeding people. And new ways are found to create more monoculture commodities and then use them for things for which food should not be used. Why are we burning grain that could feed people and using land that could give food for people to run a car at a time where, look at Paris phasing out automobiles? The mayor has been so imaginative, and most of the roads are now roads for cycling. Every design, even if it looks very natural, is imposed or selected or chosen. In this particular case, industrial agriculture was imposed by what I call the poison cartel. The reason I call them the poison cartel is because they do make poisons and they are a cartel, but also because they were merging so quickly. Their names were changing. And it was very difficult to continuously keep people's attention that, Dow, which bought Union Carbide, which killed people in Bhopal, then merged with DuPont, which is now Corteva. Very complicated story. So I simple it down and say, poison cartel. Those who made poison in Hitler's Germany, IG Farben plus Standard Oil, which is Rockefeller, and Monsanto with Mobe and DuPont, this tight group of people are today still controlling agriculture. They're controlling agriculture by first forcing their unnecessary chemicals on farming. Synthetic fertilizers were the first round of the Green Revolution. GMOs pushed herbicides and pesticides even higher. The second Green Revolution is GMOs plus globalization. You wouldn't have had GMOs without the rules of WTO. The WTO is where the Monsantos wrote intellectual property treaty, the trade-related intellectual property rights, to own the seed. And for them, the GMO became the vehicle for ownership of seed and collection of royalties. I was at the meeting where they said it so clearly in 1987, the meeting on the laws of life, on the new biotechnologies. Article 27.3b of the TRIPS agreement. Monsanto has said we were the patient, diagnostician, physician all in one. We wrote this agreement. So you had the first generation of industrial agriculture, Green Revolution, destroyed Punjab and India, and is attempting to destroy Africa. It began with Mexico with corn and wheat, and India with rice and wheat. The Green Revolution was then followed by the second Green Revolution. Second Green Revolution is GMOs pushed through globalization and new seed monopolies. Today, 60% of the commercially sold seed is controlled by the four poison cartel. Two of them, Monsanto Bayer and Syngenta ChemChina, control 40% of the seed in the markets. That's why saving seeds and seed sovereignty is so important to food sovereignty. And right now, we are in the midst of the next fake revolution, to this time pretending to solve the climate problem. And again, it is Mr. Bill Gates driving 3 levels of false solutions to climate change. First, still pushing synthetic fertilizers. I keep this book of his on my desk, How to Avoid Climate Catastrophe. He wrote it just before the summit in Glasgow. And the summit was really everything came out of this book. Here is Mr. Gates in Africa standing in front of a fertilizer plant saying, I'm happier than I look. Anyone who can be happy with synthetic fertilizers has got something missing in his thinking and his understanding of how the world works and how life works. He's on his own website, he's actually said, I love fertilizers. If fertilizers have already damaged the world and given us greenhouse gases, how can more greenhouse gases be a solution to greenhouse gases? Now, as Einstein said, a clear sign of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. Well, here's this man expecting a different outcome from the same thing that causes nitrous oxide and 300 times more deadly than climate change. Second, hugely damaging, criminalizing animals. You have to have animals in any ecosystem, perennials, annuals, and animals. Without the three playing their role together, you cannot have a sustainable ecosystem. All ancient farming systems were combinations of agroforestry, mixtures of crops and animals, either as in pastoralism or as animals like on the Navdania farm, where the energy doesn't come from fossil fuels, it comes from renewable energy of animals. The fertilizers don't come from synthetic fertilizers based on fossil fuels. They come from the gifts of the cow, the amazing ways of making compost, hundreds of ways in which you can transform the organic matter as well as the gifts of the cow to have even richer soil and soil fertility, the Jivamrit, the Panchamrit, all of these systems since ancient times in India. The third very, very ugly part of, and talking about, this constant citing of science, how can a man say the problem with animals and herbivores is they have forked stomachs? That's the problem. No, the forked stomachs are designed to make them digest the roughage that animals eat. Now, if you give them intensive feed of corn, GM corn and soya, of course they're going to get sick like we get sick with bad food. 75% of the chronic diseases are related to our eating industrial ultra-processed food and chemically contaminated food. For the animals also, herbivores means they like herbs. Grain was not their diet. So you torture them with the wrong diet just to make more money. And then you criminalize all the farmers of the world. Look at the laws in Netherlands that would totally decimate small farms. Look at the idea that 1 million sheep should be finished off in Ireland. And why is there a tax on burping in New Zealand? These are natural phenomena. This trying to escape the natural phenomena and equating the violent system with the non-violent system is the misconception we are living through. So then Mr. Gates goes on to say, and finance startups to make fake milk, fake food, fake breast milk, biomilk to solve climate change. How, I have breastfed my baby. And there's zero distance between the baby and the mother. Here he wants to create more food miles with fake milk that will totally destroy the baby's health. If the packaged foods of Nestle has devastated baby health, can you imagine what genetically engineered synthetic milk made in labs for babies will do? So we are at a threshold right now. And this year's celebration of people deciding their food future is getting rid of the artificial synthetic fertilizers that have caused the ecological catastrophe. Getting rid of the GMOs bred for more Roundup, more glyphosate, more pesticides that have failed as a technology to control pests and weeds. They've given us super pests and super weeds. And third, to defend our real food, the diversity of our food cultures, and already tell Mr. Gates, quit our food system. As we told the British, quit India when they caused famine in 1942. That's the year we said, quit India. When Monsanto came illegally to India in 98, we said, Monsanto, quit India. Now that Mr. Gates is trying to control the whole world's food, agriculture, mines, thinking, and is the largest farmland owner of the United States, it is time for all of us to join hands and say, Mr. Gates, you're a destroyer. Quit the Earth's living systems. Don't create more ecocide. Quit our food systems. We will choose what we grow, what we eat, and we will grow what's healthy for the planet and healthy for us.
I think you've raised some very, very important points here. Just to further on about the whole issue of Mr. Gates and his ilk and what they are doing, a lot of people don't realize that the biggest loss of biodiversity we have on the planet is the clearing of ecosystems, such as the Amazon for GMO soy and corn. It goes in big boats and gets transported halfway around the world to feedlots, to confined animal feeding operations in Europe and also in China. On one part of it, we've actually got the loss of some of our most valuable, highly diverse tropical ecosystems. The other side of it is that when it goes into these feedlots, that's when all the methane comes out. It's not from animals that are on pasture. And we have very good science now with the right regenerative grazing systems. Animals on pasture will actually sequester more greenhouse gases than they give out because they build up soil carbon. They're actually carbon negative. And now this is the real big threat now is the whole push to get rid of farming altogether, or that's what they pretend they're doing, and have GMO yeasts and bacteria in vats to produce things like synthetic milk, lab-grown meats, these synthetic meats. And yet what people don't realize, they need feedstocks. Where does that come from? The clearing of forests in Indonesia and Africa for oil palms, all that oil. It's the clearing, once again, of the forest in the Amazon. It's these toxic monocultures with glyphosate that will feed these food bats. So instead of being a solution to climate change, if you do the maths, it's actually one of the greatest contributors to climate change and to loss of biodiversity. Now, I know you've been very active on essentially raising this issue and explaining why once again, they're completely misrepresenting the facts.
Well, I think every time there has been a new artificial imposition in the ecological web of life, which is a food web, they've always created fairy tales to introduce it. When Haber-Bosch used the burning of fossil fuels to fix atmospheric nitrogen, they talked about now we will have bread from air. Well, there was no bread from air. You destroy the atmosphere and you destroy the land, and you're using more land as our assessments and our shift in the indicator. We said yield per acre only measures the commodity production in a monoculture, but ecosystems are about biodiversity. So we are going to measure nutrition per acre and health per acre in biodiverse systems. We will measure biodiverse productivity, not monoculture productivity. So we shifted from the monoculture metric to the biodiversity metric. And the more biodiversity you have more nutrition, you have more food. You use less acreage because of the fact that you have symbiosis on the land. If you grow a cereal and a pulse that's fixing nitrogen, you have more food overall from that acre. Whereas if you have 1 acre of cereal and 1 acre of pulse, you use more land. So, every time they talk about land saving, they're actually land expansive. That's why they have invaded into the rainforests of Indonesia. That's why they've invaded into the Congo. That's why they've invaded into the rainforests of the Amazon. And just like in the time of the myth making around fertilizers, it was talked about bred from air, those who are promoting fake lab food make it look like there'll be no use of land. Too many people who are promoting lab food are talking about saving biodiversity, talking about rewilding. Well, a simple fact, 80% of the biodiversity today is in the lands where indigenous people have taken care of biodiversity, on 20% of the land. Most lands have been taken away from them. If 80% is on 20% land, shouldn't you be looking at how people can cohabit biodiversity? And rewilding is rewilding our imagination to see ourselves as part of nature, not as strangers to nature, not as conquerors and masters of nature. So for those who are pushing lab food in the name of rewilding, I would like to remind them, this is what the Bayer head of research and development has said. You know, the code word for fake food is plant-based. When I eat a carrot from my garden or eat a spinach from my garden, I don't call it plant-based. I call it spinach and I call it carrot. I give it its proper name. This anonymous plant-based is really to make the huge feedstock, as you call it, invisible. And imagine that instead of these large giant farms that the Bayers and Monsantos and Syngentas will create, what we'll have is biodiversity popping up and animals coming down. 70% animals have disappeared on this planet in the last 70 years, which is the 70 years of industrial agriculture and green revolution, because they have invaded ecosystems where animals are. So let me just share with you the quote. For those who think plant-based, wild, rewilding, lab food, this is what Mr. Bob Reiter has said. They're sourcing different crops that create a huge opportunity for a company like us. Yeah. In order for plant-based companies to produce at scale and succeed, they require efficient sources of amino acids and carbohydrates, which will bring them around to row crops that can be tilled and cultivated by machinery. Yeah. Here's Bayer saying, only we will be able to provide the large quantities of feedstock where food is reduced to raw material of amino acid and protein rather than being eaten directly. So this much is clear. The more you create monocultures to increase commodities, the more you destroy biodiversity and you actually destroy food sources and create hunger. Second, the more the distancing between the food itself and the final product, whether it's through ultra-processed food or through lab food or through global supply chains, the longer that distancing is, the more the pollution and more the degradation of food. So we have to shorten the distance, both in terms of processing and in terms of food miles. This is why localization and diverse food systems is vital for both protecting the planet and our health. And we have to remember that lab food will not come out of the air. Lab food will take over every piece of land, destroy every forest, displace every farmer. And the slogan that is being put out of farming without farmers and food without farms, we have to say no. We want farming with more farmers. You've already displaced through your chemicals and your machines too many people. Farming is love for the land. Farming is care for the earth. More people should have the opportunity. And I know if we created new systems, all kinds of backgrounds, people from universities, engineers, they come to us at Navdania for learning how to be an organic farmer. Given a choice, a person would rather be farming than sitting to make billions for the financial system. More people would rather be farming than sitting in the biotech industry if they had the choice and if they use their consciousness. The second thing we have to do is food without farms. No. Food from the soil, food from biodiversity, that is the only thing worthy of being called food. Everything is food, everything is something else's food. Eating is living within the food cycle. Growing food is living within the food cycle. And we can play a creative role, regenerative role in that cycle, or a degenerative, destructive role in that cycle. We who have gathered for People's Food Summit are here to regenerate the food cycle, which is regenerating the carbon cycle, which is regenerating the planet cell, which is regenerating people's livelihoods. It's regenerating our health.
Based on that, for me, another one of your books that I regard as one of the most impactful is Health Per Acre, where instead of just talking about how many tons per hectare of a commodity that's produced in a monoculture, you look at the total nutrition from a biodiverse, organic, agroecological system. And in that you show that you can produce far more nutrition per acre, per hectare. And for instance, if India was to adopt these small, highly biodiverse organic farms, you could feed 2 Indias.
Yeah. So, when I did the Violence of the Green Revolution book, and I would go to Punjab and I would see these rows of wheat and rice, and my mind would come back to our mountain agriculture, little fields, little terraces, but full of the biodiversity, the Baranaja system, the 12 crop system, 12 crops growing together, never lonely monocultures, always mixtures. Even rice, which people think only grows in monocultures. We have a study on the rice and duck system. If there are ducks in your rice paddy, you need no fertilizer. The amazing system of Chemenketu in Kerala, where the shrimp and the rice system works together. The shrimp is there when there's more salinity, and the shrimp droppings are the fertilizers for the rice season. And the straw that drops is the food for the shrimp. It's a totally internal input, permanent cycle system. So I just, I could see, I said, there's more food here, less food here. So we're going to measure. So we started creating the biodiversity-based productivity measure. We said, we'll measure everything a farm grows. Most of the time in agriculture yields, you never think of the trees, but agroforestry is vital to sustainable agriculture. I mean, a jackfruit, just think of how much a jackfruit does. If you had to compete yield of jackfruit with any system, nothing would compare. Jackfruit, so abundant. And we've just had a festival, Abhumi Festival, and our friends from the South had brought, they gave jam of jackfruit, squash of jackfruit, cake of jackfruit, flour of jackfruit. There's not a thing you cannot make from the jackfruit. So not only did we get rid of biodiversity of our crops, we got rid of biodiversity of farming systems. And so we started to add all the biodiversity, and then we took the crops. And because we have very, very sophisticated system in India of our National Institute of Nutrition measures the nutrition of crops and has a whole book on the nutrition of indigenous crops and indigenous foods. So we took the biodiversity productivity, then converted that through the tables of the Nutrition Institute into nutrition per acre. And then it's so clear that if all of India was farming the way India used to farm, it's not introducing something ancient and something alien. It is remembering that when Albert Howard came to India in 1905, he saw the fields were fertile. He saw the fields were full of mixtures. From here, he learned the principles of organic farming. And the two principles he took back from India were biodiversity, mixtures, never alone, food crops should never grow alone, and the law of return. The law of return is both the law of gratitude to the earth for giving us what she does. The law of return is also of maintaining the cycle, what Liebig called the recycling, the law of recycling. Now, every scientist has realized life is about recycling. All the fake pseudoscience of a violent agriculture that is more like war than growing food is always trying to escape the cycle, whether it's through synthetic fertilizers, through GMOs, and now through fake food. But this escape will only cause more damage. We have enough potential in the earth, her biodiversity, our cultures, and ecological knowledge to see that the more we conserve life on earth, the more we protect the pollinators by not spraying pesticides, the more food we'll have. Our research has shown 1/3 of the food on our farm is from the pollinators. Most of the food on the farm is from the soil organisms. And then the seed itself, take the living seed, living soil, and the living networks of diverse beings in managing pests, in managing fertility. The more we intensify these living processes, the more food and nutrition we have. I have right here with me a recent paper, here it is. We usually forget that nutrition comes from the soil, and Howard said it so clearly, the health of the soil, the health of plants, and our health is one continuum. Here's research that shows that regenerative farms, it's a paper by called Soil Health and Nutrient Density, Preliminary Comparison of Regenerative and Conventional Farming. And just as we have found that the biodiverse systems produce more nutrition above ground, but they also produce more nutrition below ground in the soil. And the more the soil is healthy, the more soil organisms it has, we have more nutrients. So they've averaged it out. Regenerative farm crops have 34% more vitamin, more potassium, 15% more vitamin E, 14% more vitamin B1, 17% more vitamin B2. The crops from regenerative farms also had 15% more total carotenoids. That's the vitamin A. That's why, they're trying to do golden rice and torturing the rice in Philippines, again with Mr. Gates funding, when you could just increase the vitamin A precursor in crops by making soils healthy. Regenerative grown crops have 11% more calcium, 16% more phosphorus, 10%, and most important is the phytochemicals. Chemical fertilizers cannot produce phytochemicals. It's the soil organisms that help produce phytochemicals. And now the new research on our health and our gut microbe is showing that the more the diversity of phytochemicals, the more nourished our gut microbiome is, and the more it is able to regulate our metabolism and regulate our health. The Navdania farm data on nutrition per acre is similar. On every crop, we are increasing nutrition. And the data is also available that industrial food is just an empty commodity to be weighed and put in a container ship. It is not worthy of eating. It is not food anymore. 70% nutrients, of major nutrients, 100% of the phytochemicals have gone, but 70% of the major nutrients in food have disappeared the more you use chemical fertilizer. So one could summarize and say, synthetic chemical fertilizers and industrial agriculture is a way of emptying out the soil of its fertility and emptying out our food of its nutrition.
You mentioned jackfruit, and I'm really glad you did, because it's, I think, one of the most useful fruits or products there is, and most people don't know about it. So for most of our listeners and viewers, jackfruit is actually the largest fruit in the world. It dwarfs a watermelon. And it's one of the most nutritious. It can be eaten fresh. It's a beautiful fresh fruit. But its secret is to eat it as a green fruit and cook it like a vegetable. But when you cook it properly, it's like pulled pork. And when you cook it with the seeds are like nuts and they're very rich in proteins. And what we have is a totally natural meat, meat replacement, but, full of protein, that you don't have to have all the synthetic chemicals and poisons in it. And I think this is a real issue at the moment for pushing these so-called synthetic meats and saying, oh, these are vegan friendly, when really what we're talking about are highly processed, highly toxic, made with GMOs, limited testing. Where we have testing, we actually know that they can cause a range of health problems. When we, say for India, for instance, South India, it has had a vegetarian vegan culture for thousands and thousands of years. We have all the protein replacements we need they're absolutely delicious foods, and we need to get people back to eating these wonderful plant, traditional vegetarian proteins, and it'll benefit everybody to have more of these in their diet. Jackfruit should be everywhere. It's so good. Instead of these synthetic plant-based meats that are really toxic junk food. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if we were to look at, what is the planetary health crisis? That the weather systems, the climate systems, the self-management by Gaia of the climate has been disrupted by chemicals based on fossil fuels and fossil fuels themselves. So I see the climate crisis as a metabolic crisis. Is the equivalent to diabetes. Our metabolic disorder when we eat junk food is diseases like diabetes. The metabolic disorder of Gaia, based on junk energy, fossil fuels and junk chemicals, is destabilization of the climate system. But it is a metabolic disorder, and we need to heal that metabolic disorder by withdrawing the chemicals, by withdrawing extra dependence on fossil fuels, and letting the cycles heal themselves. The health of the planet is also the biodiversity. Yeah. And again, I would tell everyone to read your amazing book, Growing Life. Agriculture is about growing life. Living is about growing life. We should be growing life. And if we're growing life, we will grow more biodiversity. If we're growing more biodiversity, we will heal the climate system. So the biodiversity crisis and the extinction crisis and the climate crisis are not two separate crises. They are the same crisis. Everything that's causing climate change is also driving species to extinction and driving biodiversity extinction. But the third part that's linked to it is the issue we started with, Andre, that the issue of hunger. If you don't grow more food, you will have hunger. We are not growing food, as you said. We are growing commodities. So we need to first and foremost bring back all the forgotten foods. We often have, a hiccup, a startup. Oh, they find, jackfruit. And then they want to make flour of jackfruit in America to sell to India. That doesn't work. What works is biodiversity everywhere on the land, biodiversity on our plates everywhere. And the more the biodiversity, the more decentralized our food systems become. And the more the decentralized the food system become, not only do no human beings go hungry, no bird goes hungry, no earthworm goes hungry, no bee goes hungry. So we have to start looking at the food system as the food web, which is the web of life. And growing life is taking care of that web. That means growing diversity of every kind. So today, on World Food Day, let us, each of us, remember the diversity that we can grow and we can eat. The diversity on the land, diversity on our plate, diversity in our gut. That is the secret to health. Yeah. Annam sarva oshadi, they say in Ayurveda. The best medicine is good food. Hippocrates said it too. Let food be thy medicine. It is time to, the same industry that sells us poisons to make us sick is Big Pharma. Yeah. Pfizer was the main owner of Monsanto. Pfizer. When I did Oneness versus 1%, we looked at all the chains of ownership. And of course, now they're controlled by the big financial asset management companies, the BlackRocks and the Vanguards. But this is a perpetual money machine. Make people sick, sell them patented drugs. Make people sick with patented products, sell them patented drugs. Same entities. The same buyers give you cancer with glyphosate and then give you a patented drug. We defeated them in India. They wanted to wipe out our laws that prevent what is called evergreening, just a little changing in the drug to say, here's a new drug. So growing life means growing healthy life. Yeah. And if growing healthy life is the key, then food and health are totally intimately connected. Food and health should not be separated. We should start, every time people complain, organic food is more expensive. And I always remind them, I said, that cheap food is hugely subsidized. It's not the real cost. We've done, besides health per acre, where we measure the true nutrition, we've done wealth per acre to do the true cost of industrial agriculture and chemical farming. And the shadow of, the shadow costs of chemicals in farming for India in terms of harm to animals, harm to farmers, harm to the ecosystem is 1.3 trillion. Then you add harm to our health, that brings it to about 3 trillion. We're talking about the shadow impact being more than the GDP of the country. So growing life is growing food, is growing health, and we should start looking at food as a health system. We should definitely not see it as a commodity production system, because that's where all the distortions in metrics and yields and profits come up. Because if you subsidize them, I have watched, Europe had absolutely no factory farming. And then the GMO soya industry invaded into Amazon, created such huge surpluses, invaded into Argentina, destroyed Argentina's forests. Then they drove the cap policies to force factory farms as a market for the GMO soya animal feed. The same is the case with shrimp. The shrimp aquaculture is driven by the feed industry. So the feed industry is, first you create monocultures, you create pseudo surpluses, then you create unnecessary, harmful, destructive sectors of the economy, like factory farming of animals. We should get rid of GMO soya in the Amazon. We should get rid of factory farming everywhere. Animals should be free, farmers should be free. Farmers should be free to save their seeds. Farmers should be free to grow their biodiversity. And eaters should be free to eat food free from chemicals, from GMOs, and from destroying the health of the planet. That means long distance dependence.
You mentioned about the long distance supply chains from growing the monocultures of GM foods and supplying the CAFOs, the confined animal feeding operations, as they call them. I think I prefer to call them cruel animal feeding operations. And that the end result is this, is that for every 10 kilograms of vegetable protein or plant protein that is produced, the end result is 1 kilogram of animal protein. Now, there's something very, very wrong with that. That shows we're using 10 times the amount of protein than we need to. We're clearing all these ecosystems, whereas we could, I suppose what you have proved, and I've proved that we're both farmers on our farms, that we can produce more food, more nutrition per acre, per hectare. And I'd just like to end now with you just explaining, the example of Navdania. You're a farmer, a very successful farmer. Your farm has trained so many people. I was just there last week. And just to explain people what you do in Navdania and how you can show that these highly biodiverse systems are productive, and the fact that so many people have been trained and you're scaling this up globally.
Navdania means 9 seeds, was formalized as a separate entity in 91, but I started saving seeds in 87 when I heard the Poison Cartel talk about owning seed through genetic engineering and GMOs. That's the day I said, I will save seeds, and I will not allow the laws they want to write to criminalize seed saving to be implemented in our country. So we have managed to pass a law, Article 3J of our patent law: plants, animals, seeds are not human inventions. Simple, ethical recognition that we are part of an earth family. We've created 150 community seed banks because we believe seed is a commons. Seed has always been shared, and seed should continue to be saved and shared. on the Navdania farm, which began as a living seed bank. We started with, at that time, 200 rice varieties. Right now, we are conserving 750 rice varieties on the Navdania farm in Dehradun. But because rice has very, very special narrow niche of where it can grow, the seed bank in Orissa, which is the heart of biodiversity of rice, has more than 1,200 varieties, including salt-tolerant rices, flood-tolerant rices, aromatic rices. And we have helped, after every cyclone, distributing seeds that farmers can bring back their agriculture through. So the diversity of the seeds in our living seed banks are the answer to climate change. They are the recipes for climate resilience. And from a few seeds we can multiply, and we shared 2 truckloads with the farmers of Tamil Nadu after the tsunami. So beginning with the seed, the Navdania farm grew from a conservation farm to a farm where we started to do research. We started to do training. It became a learning center. Bij Vidyapeeth, the school of the seed, as well as, because some people can't pronounce Bij Vidyapeeth, we also call it the Earth University. And every year we offer this annual course on the living seed, the living soil, the living food, the living economies. And now we call it Return to Earth. And that's why Andre has just taught. And for next year, look out for the announcement in the Navdania Earth University website. We will be offering the course next year, as we used to do before COVID, for a full month. And we welcome as many of you as want to join. So we've had horrible climate disasters this year and last year, but our fields of the mixtures, 2 of the crops got damaged, but the remaining 7 crops survived in the 9 field. And the more diversity you have, the more climate resilience you have. And as we've discussed earlier, the more diversity you have, if you measure not through a monoculture lens, but through the diversity of nutrition, we actually have more nutrition. And we have so much, self-organized plants. We do a festival of wild uncultivated plants. They wouldn't exist if we were spraying Roundup on our farm. And I hope we will be able to do research in the future. The nutrition in the wild foods is much more than in the cultivated, and the nutrition in the native seeds is much more than in the hybrids. 14 to 15% the research is showing in rice, in wheat, and we hope to do it for other crops. So the Navdania Biodiversity Farm, Navdania itself is a movement that works across the country. We've trained 2 million farmers over these many years. We are celebrating, while we all meet on digitally, we are celebrating by honoring our seed keepers for making the forgotten foods the future foods. I think that is our commitment. We will not be extinguished. We are not part of an extinction experiment. We will not be exterminated. Our biodiversity will not be exterminated. Our knowledge will not be exterminated. Whether it is our cultures, our biodiversity, or our food, we will allow biodiversity to thrive. Navdania is a place where we practice that diversity. And I can tell you, the earth is so generous as long as you do not violate her laws.
Vandana, I just want to thank you so much, not just for this session, but for everything that you've done for all of us on this planet. You are truly a treasure. So thank you, Vandana.
Thank you, dear Andre. Bye-bye, and love to all on World Food Day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
What we're simply pointing out is that no matter what fuel source you're using, industrial civilization is unsustainable. And if we want to have a living planet, we need to go in a different direction.
So what we have to get back to, and which is what we talk about with Regeneration International and all our organizations, is regenerating the soil. Because if the plants are deficient, so even if you are eating organic, which these kids in our schools clearly are not, organic food may not have chemical inputs, but they may be nutrient poor. So without that enriched soil, regenerative soil, we need to rebuild, and that's via the microbiome, soil microbiome, human microbiome.
Everybody should get into regenerative agriculture, sustainable agriculture, permaculture. Just get into the food movement, whether it be if you're vegan or if you're vegetarian or if you're omnivore, wherever you are. We all should know about our food, and we should all do more to grow our own food. That's power, health, wealth, and culture. That's freedom. That's sovereignty.
Thanks so much for watching. To see the next clip, please go to facebook.com/regenerationinternational/live.